Hello, fellow Utopians. Brian Cusco here at Triple B. Today we've got Mr. Russ Gurley giving his talk from Herpeton. Right before we get into it, I'd like to mention that there is an event happening on November 13th through the 15th in Mesa, Arizona. If you are a fellow Arizonian, I would recommend getting out to their event. If you like turtles and tortoises, well, this is definitely the episode for you. Russ is giving a talk on it, and usually I recommend you do these talks and listen to them like a podcast maybe because of the length, but Russ brought lots of really good slides, so you're going to want to watch too. You're watching Triple B TV.
Anyway, this is the first time I've given this talk. This is new. We do a conference in Phoenix every year, so I'll probably modify it and give it there too. So you guys will bear with me. I may have some things, I may stammer a little bit. So the future of turtles. So everybody likes turtles. Even snake guys like turtles. I'm always amazed out here at how many families have turtles in their yards. Celebrities have turtles and tortoises. Family pets are brought home from vacations, and of course they thrive in backyards in Southern California. I always kind of wonder or ask, I do a lot of kids programs and a lot of programs for Kiwanis Club and Rotary and things like that back in my little town in Oklahoma. And everybody, most of the crowds are terrified of snakes no matter what, but almost everybody likes turtles. So I always have a pretty good audience wanting to learn and afraid that they're going to see a snake. So why do we like turtles? I think we're sort of conditioned from when we're kids with cartoons and Dr. Seuss and even Godzilla movies and things like that. Everybody likes turtles. For me, turtles, I spend a lot of time there. We have a local lake that's sort of spring fed. I spend a lot of time in that lake with turtles. I think I always liked snakes and lizards and other things, but it was always sort of the water and the swimming and watching them bask on logs. It was always sort of the kick for me, and just enjoy where I am in Oklahoma. We have lots of little stink pots, little musk turtles, and they were sort of my thing in the summers, was finding dozens of those down at the local lake. Of course, beyond that, the habitats for turtles, this is the Amazon River. Not sure where this one is, but it's again, it's the fish and the turtles. Habitats, of course, a lot of tortoises. Any reptile with a shell is a turtle. We differentiate them, box turtles and tortoises, but they're all turtles. So I included tortoises in this talk also. Some Egyptian tortoises. I think on the left is actually a testudo from Kazakhstan or somewhere like that. Swimming, that's actually not me, that's a friend of mine that does research on turtles. Kids swimming with turtles. So we also like to keep turtles as pets. I've kept a lot of snakes and lizards in my San Diego days out here. I was more of a lizard guy, probably from hanging out with Philippe. So we did lots of geckos and lots of little Chilean swifts and things that were coming into the country in those days. But turtles are very inoffensive and very. There's a lot of misinformation from cartoons and things like that they can leave their shells and come back and things like that. But I think we're doing a pretty good job of educating kids. And some kids are lucky and get to grow up with turtles in their yards and in their homes. So turtles in captivity. This is sort of this was sort of the foundation of turtles in captivity. Some of you guys are probably too young to remember, but lots of dime stores used to sell baby turtles, mostly red ears, by the hundreds of thousands in those days, and they would paint American flags on them, and they would sell you a death bowl to keep them in, and they would eat freeze-dried flies, was basically, they would actually ship them all over the country in these little cardboard boxes. You could order them out of the back of Boy Scout magazines, and And you can imagine that they were a disposable pet, basically. Some of them did well, and some of them were the ones that hooked us on the hobby back in those early days. Some of us did well with them, and most did not do well. They were sort of the goldfish in the bowl of the day. So now, things have changed a lot. This is a friend of mine in Tulsa, his turtle room. We have lots of great supplies and enclosures and products. We have people that make their own filters, large filters. We've benefited a lot from the tropical fish hobby as far as filters and even food and things like that, water conditioners, basking bulbs. I mean, none of this stuff was available even, like Gary, 20 years ago. Now we've got lots of science behind the products and the food and the supplies. So I'll show you some of the things that people are doing around the country and around the world. This is actually, I think, in Europe. It's pretty elaborate. That's in somebody's living room. That's somebody who's very dedicated to their pet turtle. These are some other things. We have products now called tortoise tables. It's basically like a piece of furniture. Very popular in Europe. A lot of European keepers will modify entire living rooms, entire basements to hold water. Seems to be maybe a little bit more of that going on in Europe than here as far as these very elaborate home setups. But we certainly have a lot of products here. Turtles, these are just a couple of mine. We now know that turtles and tortoises benefit, even though they've got a shell they can close up in, they benefit from hiding places to keep stress to a minimum. Again, a lot of people get these pets and they put them in a big plastic bowl so they can see them all the time, and they don't benefit that. We know that from frogs and geckos and snakes. We give all of our snakes little hide boxes and things like that. But traditionally, turtles and tortoises have been sort of wide open because we like watching them swim and watching them crawl around. But we know they benefit. This is a little Argentine snakeneck turtle looking for food. But this is all kind of elaborate where he can hide in here all the time. This is obviously very active during some parts of the day. These are little Egyptian tortoises, and they stay under here most of the time. They come out and bask. But in the very early mornings, they'll come and just do laps and laps and laps. You can see all the footprints. This is just a little pond in my animal building with a concrete pool, but all of this is cave. This is a waterfall, and this is all cave here. They've got cork bark, and so again, it's giving them security. Out in the wild, like my area, where lots of box turtles everywhere, but you rarely see them other than on the roads, and that's because they do spend a lot of time hiding and underground, even though they've got a protective shell. A couple of Kora Asian box turtles peeking out to see if there's food coming. This is a Forsten's tortoise in one of my larger pens. This is a big hollow log, and she's always watching because she knows I'm going to come and throw some food in there, and then she'll come racing out to this end where it's open and come and eat. But she does benefit a lot from the hiding places. This is a pen that actually had what did this have? This was sun gazers and pancake tortoises. This pile is probably 6 feet wide by 6 feet, and maybe a stack 4 feet tall. So they had lots and lots of places to hide and feel secure. So a lot of people around the country, these are just some shots of what people are doing for their turtles. We have a friend in Florida who watches the newspapers, and any time somebody's giving away an old swimming pool or there's one for $100, he takes his crew over, they tear it down, bring it back to his place and turn it into a turtle pond. It's a great idea. It's very cheap, and it holds hundreds of gallons of water, maybe thousands of gallons of water. And then he adds a laying box here at the back with a ramp going up to it, and he's produced lots and lots of turtles that way. This is just a little aquarium in my old office. The water is actually full of peat moss. It's not nasty. This is Cord Offerman. He's a vet in Austin. He's part of our turtle and tortoise preservation group, building an outdoor pen. He's keeps a lot of Asian terrestrial species. And on the right is a pond, again, sort of emphasizing that it's not even hardcore herpetoculturists that are keeping turtles. There are lots of people keeping turtles. And I think it's I'll talk about a little bit about TTPG a little later, but it's a real opportunity from a herpetoculture standpoint of getting this network of assurance colonies. Of course, a lot of people some people don't know if they've got tortoises or box turtles in their backyards or what water turtles. They just have water turtles in their yard, and typically red ear sliders that they've bought at a show or something or been given. But it is an opportunity to use those outdoor ponds in this beautiful weather to do something bigger and better herpetoculture-wise. I guess about 10 or 15 years ago, a product came on the market called Waterland Tubs by Pete Jansma. He's out here in Southern California, that has really sort of revolutionized turtle keeping, both indoors and outdoors. His tubs are at zoos and private facilities all over the world. Just an amazing product. They've got a built-in ramp and a built-in lane area at the top. This is a row of Waterland tubs being used for grow-out pens for turtles somewhere. So anyway, and of course now with the movement, maybe the last 7 or 8 years, especially the movement to more naturalistic setups for our herps. Again, turtles have not benefited from that greatly because people sort of like to see them and handle them and give them names, whereas maybe the frog and salamander and dragon snake crowd is doing a little more towards these natural setups. Aquatic turtles are a little more destructive, and they eat a lot of aquatic plants, so it's a little harder to do naturalistic setups with them. But I saw these two online, and I thought, man, they'd be perfect for Vietnamese leaf turtles or something like that, or even little musk and mud turtles would do really great. I don't know that these have turtles in them, but when I was doing some investigating for this, I thought, man, that would be an ideal setup because it's got that little shelf where the turtle could kind of go and hide a little bit. There are lots of great zoos around the country keeping turtles and tortoises. Unfortunately, most of their setups are for display and not for herpetoculture. This is a beautiful setup at the Dallas World Aquarium in Dallas. They have Podocnemus expansa, which is one of the largest freshwater turtles in the world. It's an endangered species. It's CITES Appendix 1. And they literally, at some times of the year, you can see them laying their eggs in the water, and they float down, and all the red-tailed catfish eat the eggs. So again, endangered species, but they don't have a laying area. This tank is full of big red-tailed cats and Herpeton and manatees, all sorts of things. So the turtles lay every year and just feed all of those, cut down on the food bill, so unfortunately. This is a really cool, I think this is in some sort of Bass Pro Shop or something in Missouri. It's a beautiful big golden alligator snapping turtle. But again, it's a display animal. There's no place for laying or for reproduction. Another beautiful crocodile exhibit at Fort Worth Zoo that has a lot of big chitra and caligar, what are they now? Batagur borneoensis, but not really a laying site. And the only laying site, they have had babies hatch in there, but the babies scramble off into the water and then the crocodiles eat them. So unfortunately, I won't say most, but a lot of zoos are set up this way for displays, and you see most of the reproduction, especially of the larger aquatic turtles, is in the private sector. This is actually a concrete pond that was created. This is also Pete Jansma's house for diamondback terrapins to come up and to lay. This is a friend of ours in Europe who has a lot of testudo in his backyard, Mediterranean tortoises. He's one of the big private breeders in Europe. So if you offer your turtles and tortoises these special access to sunlight, access to good food, correct temperatures, obviously healthy adult animals, the benefits are herpetoculture. are producing animals. These are a couple of Galapagos tortoises breeding at a private facility in Arizona, which of course leads to lots of great babies. These are some I've hatched and some of our members in our group. Nice little collection of Spangleri, little Vietnamese leaf turtles, which they would come in a lot in the 80s and 90s before the Chinese ate most of them, and very, very difficult to keep alive. One of the hardest turtles. In fact, we would joke, that you just wouldn't. I mean, you wouldn't even try them, because the mortality rate was so high. So we would actually try to get people not to purchase them. But they're one of the success stories where people actually got a few to survive and thrive and started producing and holding back babies and building these assurance colonies. And now they're pretty good shape in the U.S. Not great. They're probably very few left in nature in Vietnam. The future of turtles and tortoises in captivity in herpetoculture. What can we learn about what's happened in the past or what's going on now to assure some success in the future? There are a lot of legislative hurdles, and they've already touched on it a little bit here. Philippe did this morning. There are a lot of species that you just can't keep. The one on the left is one of the ring maps from Alabama that's a federally protected species. Of course, everybody loves and knows the bog turtle, which is protected heavily. Originally, like everybody's also knows, the original range of the box turtle was like here, and this is what we've got left. And this map is probably 6 or 7 years old, so it may actually be more fragmented now, but you've got these little fragmented populations now that are separated by Walmarts and parking lots and things like that. So I think in the areas they're found, they're doing okay, but it's certainly nothing like the original range. Where I am, box turtles are protected. We're not allowed to touch them. I think we can move them off the road when we see them on the road, but they don't want you to certainly not own one or have one in your backyard. So there are two, I'll just very briefly, there are two ways that all plants and animals are protected, and we all know CITES. CITES is the international protection. It is an act that protects animals flowing into and out of the United States. And it's used incorrectly a lot, especially on social media. People say, well, I can't send that turtle to New York because it's CITES. And once an animal's in the U.S., it has CITES is really sort of irrelevant. So CITES has 3 appendices. Appendix 1 are the most protected. They're the rarest. Most of them were put on, especially the animals from India and that part of the world, were put on more as a political statement. They're not rare, and they probably have never been rare as far as Hamilton's pond turtle and some of these others. But when they put the act together in '73, they needed a good bulky list, so they put a lot of these animals on there with really not a lot of data backing up why they were put on there. So of those species, I kind of marked for you the ones that are being kept, which are the ones in purple. You can see the big Badager is the genus of very large river turtles from Southeast Asia. Platysternon is the big head turtle from Asia. And Pyxis are the spider tortoises from Madagascar. Those are actually being kept in captivity by turtle and tortoise keepers and breeders, but they're not in great shape. Very small sort of populations. The ones I have in green are ones that I feel are sort of in pretty good shape. Radiated tortoises, even though they have a lot of paperwork, they're doing pretty well and they breed very easily. You can see the Geochelone platynota, the Burmese star tortoise, is being kept and bred in pretty large numbers. So anyway, that's those are the species. Appendix 2, again, has less protection. They still need paperwork to leave the country of origin, so it's a much larger group. Again, not a lot of them being kept, for that large of a group. Again, the ones in purple are being kept by private breeders and zoos and being produced. The ones in green, I feel like, are in pretty good shape as far as assurance colonies and numbers, but those ones in purple are sort of hanging on. Maybe 5 or 10 breeders in the United States that are doing really well with them, so they're producing a lot. But as we know, like Mike was saying with the frogs, somebody's interest change, or they want to try a new species, and they could dump this project, and then all of a sudden they're gone. A good example, we were talking earlier about Bert Langerworf, who was a reptile breeder in Alabama, and he just produced hundreds of Australian water dragons and hundreds of Argentine black and white tegus every year. And so he passed away in 2008, and we thought, well, at least those 2 species are in good shape, because he's produced so many thousands of them over the last 10 or 15 years. And you look around today, and Australian water dragons are almost impossible to find. Tegus are still doing pretty well because we get them from the skin trade and the pet trade. But it's amazing how one person's influence in this small industry of ours can change things pretty dramatically. And then Appendix 3 are again, they need paperwork to travel around and enter the country, but they're not really tracked. And as you can imagine, a few more of them are in pretty good shape, but there's still a few there that aren't even in captivity. That last one is actually a hybrid now, I think, or a natural intergrade. So, of course, I've mentioned, and anybody who's kept turtles knows that the turtles for centuries have been eaten in China as a delicacy, as an aphrodisiac, and as a folk medicine. And they have really put a dent in the world's population of turtles. Originally, we would see a lot of the Asian species disappearing, and then it was sort of the Southeast Asian and Indonesian species were showing up in the live food markets. And now you can actually find American turtles, African turtles, other parts of the world that are being sucked into this Chinese food market. So the Endangered Species Act is the U.S. version, basically, of CITES. It's a protective regulation, and it was in the 70s. And again, a lot of turtles were originally put on without any data saying that they were actually rare in nature. But and the interesting thing is there are a lot of foreign species on this list. These are the U.S. ones. You can see the bog turtle, flattened musk turtle from Alabama. There's some sliders there. The ring maps. There's a little mud turtle that's only found on a small little Native American reservation in Arizona. My group tried years ago to work with the local fish and game people to produce numbers of these, get groups of these in with private breeders and produce lots of them, and so have an assurance colony outside of their normal range, and then to donate a number of offspring back to put back in nature, and they were not interested at all in that. So these are the foreign species that are on the U.S. Endangered Species Act, which again, I don't know how a U.S. Fish and Wildlife official protects a turtle in Madagascar or a slider in Cuba. It just doesn't make sense. Even fewer of these species that are being kept and bred in any numbers. Some of them are very large. That Batagur basca is a big Southeast Asian river turtle, but some of them are too large to keep in captivity, but a lot of them, private breeders just don't want to mess with the paperwork. You have to have a CBW permit to keep this species and to do commerce in it, to buy them, sell them, or trade them. And it's just too much for most breeders. In the early days, there were guys that bred a lot of radiated tortoises. They bred a lot of these big Amazon river turtles. But when this system came in and you have to have a federal permit and the person you're selling to has to have a federal permit, it was just too much. So most of those guys got rid of those species and dedicated their ponds and enclosures to things that they could freely move between hobbyists back and forth. So that's why a lot of these radiated tortoises back in the 60s and 70s and early 80s almost disappeared from the hobby because there were the breeders didn't want to deal with all of the paperwork. These are some of those turtles. Used to be Caliger borneoensis, now it's part of Batagur. Of course, the Galapagos tortoises are heavily protected. Most people know about them because of Lonesome George and all the stuff in the media. Bottom left is one of the box turtles from Mexico. Again, very easy to breed in captivity, but has a lot of paperwork attached to it. So, and Podocnemus expansus, the largest, the big Amazon River turtle. And the funny thing is, I mean, Podocnemus expansa, this big Amazon River turtle, they've turned loose probably 2 or 3 million babies into the Amazon River. Uniphilus is a little bit smaller version, beautiful yellowhead. They're big turtles, but they've dumped hundreds of thousands of those. They breed them at a facility down there, and so of course most of these captive hatch ones could be kept and without the all the legal entanglements, but nobody's interested in that yet. So that was sort of the legal things that have prevented a species or several species from being in herpetoculture today. Another reason is that they're simply just too rare. This is one of the Indian river turtles. I don't know if it's ever been in captivity in the U.S. I'm not sure if any zoos have ever even had this species before. Maybe years ago, but I don't know of anybody currently. Upper left is a little turtle from India that I don't think has ever been in captivity in the U.S. Geomyda japonica came in years ago, maybe 20 to 30 specimens. The little homopus, the little padlopers from South Africa. Again, they were around a little bit maybe in the 80s, but very small numbers, and none of these have really ever dialed in. Japonica is being produced a little bit, but not, it's sort of sketchy where they're going to be in the future. These are all very rare. The Latensis from the Philippines and a couple of more Indian turtles that I don't think are in captivity. Of course, Kuora, everybody knows about the Asian box turtles. There are 9 species recognized, and I think 7 of the 9 are now extinct in nature. They're only found in captivity now. These are the 2 rarest, are Unanensis and Joey. Unanensis was discovered in a live animal food market, and the only live specimens are those ones that were found in the food market. Nobody even knew what the locality was because nobody had ever seen one in nature. Of course, again, the Chinese, when you've got 1 billion people that want to eat, they eat a lot of stuff, and they eat turtles has been part of their culture, eating turtles for thousands of years. So here are some of the tortoises that are very rare. Sorry, I had to. Where's Jeff Lim? He can help me. No, but Conyxus, of course, Conyxus speci, the specs hingeback, has been imported probably by the thousands, maybe definitely by the hundreds, and they just do not have not done well as far as a captive situation. So I did a poll of all of my turtle and tortoise friends around the country who keep and breed turtles and tortoises, and I said, what is the rarest turtle in captivity in the United States? So I asked 50 guys, and I got 50 answers, of course. But this was kind of an interesting one as far as a breeding group, a potential assurance colony animal, rather than some 1 or 2 that get smuggled in. That's why on those others I said, I don't know if there are any, because there are some guys in our industry that have things that they are not supposed to have. So, and that's the same with snakes or lizards or anything else. So as far as turtles, I was asking, and somebody said, oh, I heard that there was a an Indian roof turtle that some dude in Georgia has, you know. So I wasn't really looking for a single animal that got brought back by an ant in her suitcase or something. So what is the rarest turtle in the U.S.? So this will give you a hint. It's Madagascan, right? So everybody always says, oh, that's easy. It's the plowshare tortoise. Well, actually, the plowshare tortoise, there are probably about 35 in the United States right now. There aren't any in private hands, but the Baylor Center in Ojai has a pretty big group of them. This is a little spider tortoise that was imported by the hundreds back in the late 80s, early 90s. And for whatever reason, this subspecies did not do well. The flat-tailed tortoise and the two other subspecies of spider tortoises have done pretty well. But as far as we can tell, there are only 9 oblonga left in the United States right now. So that number may be 10 or it may be 7, but it's actually a very rare. That's a turtle that may or may not make it into herpetoculture in the future. They lay one egg at a time, and they typically stress out. You can move them from across the room to a new enclosure, and they stress out for a few weeks, and some of them don't make it. So another reason that prevents some species from being a part of herpetoculture is just husbandry challenges. The giant soft shells definitely fit that category. You have to be a pretty dedicated turtle keeper to set up giant soft-shell turtles. I would say there are probably 3 guys in the United States that keep these giant soft shells. Of course, 2 of them are in Florida, where you can do them in outdoor ponds year-round, and then there's a guy in Arizona who does greenhouse work. But there was one guy in Texas that had a large collection. He passed away, and again, like Mike's frog scenario, they're gone. They sort of go out into the hobby as 1s and 2s, as pets, or wow, look at this, and then they're gone. So, of course, mata-matas, everybody loves mata-matas. Ooh, typo. And but they're a big turtle. They're great. They come in, they're imported in, usually smuggled with tropical fish, but they come in 4 or 5, 6 inches, and they're just a very, very cool little turtle. But they get big. They get 18 to 24 inches, and it becomes sort of an unmanageable pet, and it also becomes a very difficult herpetocultural project. Pig-nosed turtles, again, it's like a little mini sea turtle. They have flippers, and they swim around, and they get large. They get about the size of a small trash can lid, and so it's not an easy turtle to keep in herpetoculture. Giant alligator snappers, there's maybe 2 or 3 guys in the country that are producing alligator snappers for the industry, and they're not ideal. They're like an aquatic sulcata. There's another picture of one of those Amazon giant river turtles. Big soft shells. They've got one at San Diego Zoo, and when the gharial exhibit that's about that size. It's just, they're big, they're very defensive animals, and they're not easy. There's a big group of Galapagos tortoises. It's more of the soft shells. That's the big, lower left is the big Raphetus, the one that was in the lake in Vietnam that died. That one died probably 10 years ago. And then, of course, the last surviving female of that species died about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So that is there's one with a bunch of fishermen standing around it, probably getting ready to butcher it. But so that species is down to 2 males. It's hard to come back from that. Some species come into the hobby and they just fail to thrive. This is a really cool spiny neck turtle from South America. They've been imported in large numbers from a captive breeder in Uruguay. And I personally have produced 71 eggs from this species and never hatched a baby. It's on film too, isn't it? It's just, they're great, but it's for whatever reason, we're not hitting it right. There are guys in the country, there are probably 100, 150 of them in the United States, so they're still trying. We've had 2 or 3 accidental hatchings from people in my group, but we definitely have not got this one figured out yet. The same thing with, upper right, the twist-neck turtle. They have imported these from Suriname and Guyana for 30 years. They brought in thousands of them into the pet trade. And I don't know, I think maybe 2 or 3 hatched out last year. Again, not the breeders, very competent breeders, but really not sure what they did to produce them. The hingeback tortoises have been coming into the pet trade for many years. They just don't do well. Upper left is one of the Mexican wood turtles that's come into the United States recently. It doesn't seem to be dialing in and doing very well for most people. Lower right, Rhinoclimes funereus is a big wood turtle from Suriname. Again, it used to come into the United States in very large numbers, but we just don't see babies. We don't see captive hatched babies. Again, maybe 1 or 2 sort of accidental, hey, I hatched one and it's a big deal, but we can't seem to repeat it. Leucocephalon, this is a white-headed turtle from Sulawesi. Same sort of thing. It was brought in during the 90s in large numbers into the pet trade, and more of the special. They were an expensive turtle, so more of the specialty side of our hobby. And again, maybe 1 or 2 babies produced in the last 20 years. Spider tortoises. Everybody was very excited when these were being exported from Madagascar, but again, a few breeders working with them. They lay really 1 egg at a time and maybe 3 or 4 eggs a year. So it's one of those ones that could be, right on the cusp of going into the future for herpetoculture. Some species are just too common, or there's just not much interest in them. I've got a friend that'd be really upset about that. There's a couple of sliders and a mud turtle of some sort. I don't know, but a lot of the guys that are very serious about producing turtles for the future don't want to dedicate a pond to a red ear slider or a Mississippi mud turtle or something like that. They're Mississippi mud turtles are excellent pets. The stink pots, all the little mud turtles are excellent. But it seems like, again, we want to, when we have people come over, we want to say that's the white-headed, yellow-lipped Madagascan tree climber, and not, yeah, I've got a pond full of stink pots. So, striped neck turtle, there was a time there. This is sort of the Asian version of the red ear slider, that striped neck, and very, very hardy, very prolific. And so there's not a lot of interest in them in the hobby, to be honest. We could produce lots of them and give them away, but that's about the only way you could have a pond full of them. This was an interesting one. I didn't know where to put it, so I put it in with this. We all know how many Russian tortoises have come into the United States. You go to every reptile show in the country, and there's 100 of them. I found that Kazakhstan, they send out 39,000 a year, and Uzbekistan sends out 35,000 a year of live ones, and very, very few babies. Even out here where they thrive in your backyards in Southern California and Arizona, there's just no babies. We've got a few group members that, again, they'll produce 1 or 2 a year, but when you think of the hundreds of thousands that have been imported over the last 15 years, it's amazing that they're not everywhere. I think luckily the adults live a very long time, so I think there is time to figure it out, but it's it's one of those ones that's sort of a head scratcher. So habitat destruction has prevented a lot of animals from coming into herpetoculture. Just very briefly, the world's tallest buildings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7 of the 8 are all in Southeast Asia or in China. And so what they do, they have these machines that go down the beaches in Malaysia and all over Southeast Asia, and it just scoops all the sand. They actually just remove the entire beach because they need to make concrete. So they have these barges that are newly, 10 years. They've created these sort of factories that go up and down the rivers and just remove all the sand. Some of the villagers will save part of the areas and put the big female turtles in there. But it's mainly because they want to eat the eggs. It's not, they're not saving the species, it's just they need a laying area. So you have all of these areas now where there's no laying areas for the turtles to come up. So for year after year, for at least the last 10 or 12 years, there's no place to lay eggs because all your sandy beaches are gone. And that's the Purok and some of the big these giant rivers in Southeast Asia where these big turtles lay their eggs. And of course, like I mentioned before, they sell turtles to China in the live food markets by the ton, not by the turtle, but by the ton and by the truckload. A friend of mine just got back from Africa and he said he saw more turtle shells and more dehydrated sea turtles than he's ever seen. And he's been going there for about 10 or 12 years to study pangolins. He said you see a lot of turtles there in these voodoo markets and these traditional medicine markets. Still a lot of turtles caught and sold as pets around the world, wild caught ones. These are actually Egyptian tortoises that were headed to a live pet market in Morocco. And of course, we're losing a lot of turtles to introduced species, like somebody mentioned before, maybe Philippe. In my area, we have a lot of feral hogs. A lot of the places as a kid where I used to go and dig up soft-shelled turtle eggs, you go there now and it's just, it looks like a landmine went off and it's all pig hoof marks. They smell the turtle eggs down in the sand and dig them up and eat them. And of course, we know what's going on with cats. Fire ants is a big thing. In fact, 30 years ago when I was out here with Philippe, we used to lose some frogs and things to ants. We would have to make special contraptions to protect frogs from ants coming in looking for moisture. And of course, goats compete with tortoises for plants. And all of that, habitat destruction, introduced species, it's all under this category of man. That's a confiscation of Philippines. They didn't even know the turtle existed in the Philippines until they stopped these two trucks, and they had they didn't know the population. They found 3,000, I think, of these turtles, and they had estimated the population at about 300 or 400. And of course, all of you guys probably on social media have heard about the radiated tortoises. They went to a house in Madagascar, and there were 4,000 radiated tortoises in this little shack, destined probably for Asia. TSA and other groups swooped in and saved them, and then about 6 weeks later, they found another 5,000 in a different house, and so it just keeps going on and on. When somebody's either their family is hungry or their income each year is $20 and they can get a lot of money for these tortoises or lemurs or everything else, they're not going to stop. A lot of tortoises, of course, get caught at the airport. I think smuggling, I may be naive, but I think smuggling is probably down now, or maybe it's because it's all going to Asia and not here. But I think with all the post 9/11 stuff, I think probably there's at least less at the airports. This is a horrible, horrible thing that's going on right now in China today. They're taking live salamanders, live fish, live baby turtles, and they seal them in plastic with colored water, and they sell them as keychains. So the turtle or the salamander lasts about a week, of course suffocates in there, and then they throw it in the trash and go buy another one. Just humans are horrible. So some of the success stories, briefly. This guy's been mentioned before. We have a member in Florida that's produced thousands of Hamilton's pond turtles, one of the most beautiful turtle in the world. Unfortunately, it's a U.S. endangered species, and it's CITES Appendix 1, so he can only sell them within the state of Florida, even though they're captive hatched by the hundreds, by the thousands. This last year, with our group, he offered to send 100 a year for 10 years back to India. My group pays the shipping. All they have to do, they can head start them or whatever they want to do and then dump them back into the rivers. And they said, no, we don't need them. We have too many already. So it's a very strange situation. This is actually a success story. This was a turtle from Vietnam that's been extinct in nature for probably 10 or 15 years. And U.S. turtle breeders produce so many of them that we actually give them away. I'll tell you about my group in a minute. But anyway, to anybody who's proves that they're competent to us. But it's just one of those turtles. It's very prolific. It's not very pretty, but it's very prolific, and it's a really a great size for a pet. But this one was one that was definitely saved by captive breeding. I've got this under success stories, but I'm a little torn because we also have a rehab and rescue portion to our group, and we really rescue a lot of sulcatas. This is a funny story. Philippe in the early days called me one morning when I lived out here, and it was about, I guess it was about 89. And he said, "Grab your bag, we're going to LA." And I, wow, something's up. So we raced up to Kalamazoo, and there was a big crowd there, and we went in, and they just opened up a big wooden crate, and it had 4 sulcatas in it. And I mean, people were driving from Seattle and from Phoenix and Tucson to see these sulcatas that had just been imported into Kalamazoo in, again, about 1989. And of course, they had the tether marks and drilled in the plastron where they kept them in the villages. And there was about a 4-gallon omelet down in the bottom of this cage where one of the females had dropped eggs on the journey over, and of course they'd smashed them all, and Ty was crying. But to think what's happened in that really short period of time, in 30 years, is pretty amazing. That's just a big sulcata. Some more success stories, of course, redfoots are being farm raised in very large numbers, both in South America and here. Elongated tortoises are doing pretty well. Most of the testudo, unfortunately, a lot of the testudo in the early days were mixed and matched, and so now guys are trying to get them back at least phenotypically to see what where we are. Egyptian tortoises doing pretty well in Europe and in the United States as far as production, and doing very, very poorly in their native range. That population there is probably now all gone. I just talked to a researcher there last week, and he thinks that Egyptian population is either all gone or functionally gone, that there may be a few specimens here and a few specimens there, but it's not a population. So in Libya and Israel, they're hanging on, and he said mainly because of the violence in those areas, that people don't come there to get them anymore because they're afraid of getting shot. So again, I think 2 things that will probably happen to this industry is not just for turtles, but I think it's we're losing natural places to Walmarts and parking lots and things like that. I always pick on Walmart. We know that kids benefit, that young people benefit from being out in the woods. All of us do, from being connected to nature. But I think what's happened, especially in the last 5 years, Animal Planet and all of those are teaching our kids that animals are dangerous and that animals will make you sick. And anybody that has more than 3 animals at home is psychotic or a hoarder. These are all, I literally did a search for 5 minutes, and these are all Netflix programs and things that our kids are watching on social media, and it's when good pets go bad and when good pets go bad too. Santa attacked by reindeer. These are all, I didn't make these up. I couldn't. So that's my fear, is that a lot of the media is teaching our kids that animals are scary and dangerous. Of course, it's all funded. Most of it's funded by the Humane Society and PETA and those crackpots. And an interesting thing that I think maybe Ty from Kalamazoo told me, we learned about keeping reptiles by going out and catching one on the road. In Oklahoma, I would see a box turtle, and my dad would let me get out and safely run across the street from the back of his El Camino and get that box turtle and take it home. And I may not have done great with it, but I loved it. And I think now we're also teaching our young people, don't touch that box turtle. We've got it ingrained. Don't touch the turtle on the road. Don't touch the snake on the road. which is an interesting thing that I haven't thought of, because like I said, we took them home and we put the little slider in a tub or a box or a tote, and a lot of people don't do that now. And that's sort of something we've done. We've taught them not to do that. So we know that zoos and private hobbyists are going to be the final place to see and experience many wild animals in the future. We know that habitats will continue to be burned and bulldozed. And we know that in the future, if habitat is restored, private hobbyists and zoos will be the only source for animals to be reintroduced to those recovered habitats. But how do we promote this? It's education. I do a lot of kids programs. I have a lot of free time, so I do a lot of kids programs. Todd Goodman from Timberline and I started a junior herpetologist program for IHS. We're both on the board of IHS, so every year we try to bring lots and lots of more kids into IHS. Chicago Herp Society, my TTPG, even our small Oklahoma City club, they all have junior herp societies now, which they haven't had in the past. I think Chicago has, but there are a lot of societies. You look around a herp society meeting like IHS, and it looks like God's waiting room. I mean, I'm the youngest guy in there, you know. And so we've started these programs to try to get kids involved. And it's not easy, and it's very grassroots, and it's very one here and one there. But I think it's incredibly important to get kids involved. So I would say join a group. My turtle and tortoise preservation group I started in '96, but we remodeled in '06 to become fully nonprofit. We do a conference in Arizona every November. We put out a journal once a year called The Batager, and it's just like this. We get to come and hang out and talk and just a bunch of turtle nerds and all in a big room. Our conference is always the second weekend in November. Everybody is welcome, no matter what your level or interest. We have a guest banquet speaker every year. You can see some of these guys are some of the top guys in the world: John Cann, Peter Pritchard, Rom Whitaker, David Fabius. John Cann, we love him so much we've done it twice. We started a week. It's the week of Earth Day. We do a thing now called International Turtle and Tortoise Week, along with ZoomEd. They have been invaluable in getting these packets to teachers. We do just information packets about turtles and turtle conservation and puzzles for the younger kids. And I can't remember, Gary, how many we've sent out, but we've sent out, this is the fourth or fifth year, and we've reached literally hundreds of thousands of children all over the world with either real packets that they send out or digital downloads that teachers can access. This is a little blurb Dave and Tracy Barker put in their Invisible Arc about the Turtle and Tortoise Preservation Group, about we just got to bring people in. We've done projects where we've genetically tested Galapagos tortoises to see if they're hybrids or not, and to try to get to the goiter thing. And we just try to promote what we believe in, that we're producing, that this is a very important part of conservation, is producing captive hatch babies. A lot of people don't get it. You know, they think we're producing pets and we're dumping pets and we're doing it for the money. Believe me, nobody's breeding reptiles for the money. It's the passion, and it's really is the way of the future. So, my friend Bill Mullen, he wanted me to tell everybody, pick a species and become the leading expert on that species. I think the problem we do, and especially it was a little bit in Mike's talk and probably the Rhacodactylus talk too. What we do, we either set up 2 of these and 4 of these and 2 of these and a pair of these and a trio of these, so that we can experience a lot of animals. And probably a good idea is for us to set up 40 of these and 50 of these, and that's it. And it's very, very difficult. This is where I get a lot of strange looks, because it's hard to become the expert when you have 50 species or 60 species. Some guys do it, but so this is a thing that he wanted me to put out for our TTPG, and so I included it here. And then my portion of was, I think we should give all our captive offspring away, especially the rare stuff, the endangered species. You can give them away for free. You just can't sell them or buy them or trade them, the endangered species. So you can give them away as a gift or on breeding loan. So these are the people that donate to TTPG to keep us running. Some of our board members, of course, Gary and ZooMed and Timberline, Eco, the Ashleys, all of these people. And definitely support USARK. And PJAC has jumped back into the reptile game. They were sort of were maybe a little overwhelmed by all the rest. They do the entire pet industry, where USARK is our focused. Phil Goss is here. He'll give a talk and support these guys, because I really think, I'll say it here, Phil Goss is working himself to death. You hear Phil? See, he's out working himself to death right now. I really think we need to expand USARK. We can talk about it later. I know I'm running late. So there's a stack of Phrynops hilleri from Argentina, and these are all the people that helped me. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for sticking around and checking that out. I'm sure Russ appreciates it. I appreciate it. Next week, we're going to be going back to the Pomona Reptile Super Show, and my buddy Frank is going to talk about snakes and stuff, and being around a long time since the show is beginning. And until then, you've been watching Triple B TV. Y'all take care.